Welcome, everyone, to our water and wastewater capacity allocation policy information webinar. My name is Dan Santos. I will be walking us through the webinar with the help of our team here at the county from both Public Works and Planning. So, as I mentioned earlier, some housekeeping items. Please do use the Q&A feature on Teams to send your questions through. We'll take some time at the end of the presentation to go through some of these questions. And if they're placed in the general chat, we may not see them. So if you could please use the Q&A function in Teams, that would be appreciated. So the presentation is broken out into a few parts. We're going to start with introductions. Then we'll dive into a water and wastewater overview. We'll review the responsibilities that fall under Oxford County. We'll give a bit of an overview on understanding capacity. Then we're going to discuss what is used to determine future servicing. We'll dig into then the water and wastewater capacity allocation policy. And then we're going to go over some common questions we do anticipate to receive from the public. And then at the end, as I mentioned, we're going to open it up for questions using that Q&A function. So as I mentioned, my name is Dan Santos. I am a water and wastewater services technologist here at the county. A portion of my role at the county is to review capacity requests and update our capacity tracking system with various operational and planning information year over year. We also do hydraulic modeling for our water systems and soon our wastewater systems. And I'm joined here today with Eric Gilbert, Manager of Development Planning, to assist with any planning or application related questions, and Don Ford, Senior Manager of Water and Wastewater Services, to assist with any water or wastewater specific questions. The team here are some of the key people that help develop the allocation policy, and will be able to answer your questions. However, if there are questions at the end of the presentation that may be left unanswered, we will provide a response via email at a later time. So let's explore Oxford County's water and wastewater systems. So Oxford County is responsible for the assessment of municipal water supply and sewage treatment system capacities and reserve capacities in accordance with applicable legislation, regulations, policy, guidelines issued by the province. This would be the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, as well as the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation, and Parks. So within the county, this spans over 17 water systems for Beachville, Bright, Brownsville, Durham Center, Drumbo-Princeton, Embro, Hickson, Ingersoll, Innerkip, Lakeside, Mount Elgin, Oxford South, which encompasses Norwich, Springford, and Otterville, Plattsville, Tavistock, Thamesford, Tillsonburg, and Woodstock. This also spans over 11 wastewater systems for Drumbo, Embro, Ingersoll, Innerkip, Mount Elgin, Norwich, Plattsville, Tavistock, Thamesford, Tillsonburg, and Woodstock. So collectively, the water systems have 63 wells, 7 booster stations, 32 treatment facilities, and 42 reservoirs or towers. And our wastewater systems have 38 sewage pumping stations, as well as 9 wastewater treatment facilities, which include mechanical, lagoons, membrane, bioreactor, and recirculating sand filter facilities. So Oxford County Public Works is responsible for assessing municipal water supply and treatment capacities, assessing sewage conveyance and treatment system capacities, and assessing reserve capacities in accordance with applicable legislation. So this would be the MECP's D51 calculation, which is the province's calculating and reporting uncommitted reserve capacity at sewage and water treatment plants, which is used by municipalities to assess their reserve capacity within their systems. So various tools have been developed to assist with these assessments, including our reserve capacity interactive worksheet formulated using the MECP's D51, our water models, and our developing wastewater models. So to fully understand capacity, let's start with a quick overview on how the capacity is reviewed for water and wastewater systems. So unutilized capacity in a system can be used for future capacity commitments. The MECP term for this capacity is uncommitted hydraulic reserve capacity. In the water systems, utilized flow represent the historic 4-year average of the max day flows treated from the water treatment facilities. And for wastewater systems, utilized flows represent the historic 4-year average of the average day flows treated at the wastewater treatment facilities. The available unutilized capacity then represents the system's remaining capacity after accounting for the utilized flows. We do, however, need to be mindful that production limitations do occur in some systems. So a dynamic capacity, removing the largest producing well, operating using just trucked-in water to service a community, or any other limitations on a system, as well as emergency scenarios, is reviewed. So identifying a system's future servicing needs in any community is completed using various tools, some of which include reviewing the system's available unutilized flows. So utilized flows representing the existing system's flows that are experienced at our treatment facilities for either water or wastewater. And this is a combination of residential and ICI flows and are tracked to determine the available unutilized flows prior to any commitments. Utilizing growth projections from master plan and development charge studies to understand future growth in a system. Reviewing historic building permit trends, both looking at a short-term or longer-term averages. This represents the real build-out rates in any of our serviced communities. And reviewing current capacity commitments and conditional capacity commitments and aligning them with planned system expansions or upgrades. So the table here represents a sample of a system upgrade timed to planned system capacity utilization, where the red line represents the capacity of the system and the gray dashed line represents the building permit trend line. The green bars represent the build-out years for those capacity commitments. So let's dive into the water and wastewater capacity allocation policy. So Oxford County staff have utilized an internal capacity allocation protocol since being established in 2013. So this protocol has guided capacity allocations for water and wastewater servicing since its establishment. Working with our community planning team, Oxford County Public Works has updated the protocol now into the water and wastewater capacity allocation policy, which has been adopted by County Council through bylaw at the October 8th Council meeting. The new allocation policy serves as an approved framework to continue evaluating water and wastewater capacity requests within each system, establish a standard for collaborating with the development community, being transparent on how capacity commitments are held, mitigate the risk of overallocation and underutilization of infrastructure resources, leading to costly upgrades outside of true capital need. And the policy has been updated to align with recent regulatory changes in Bill 185. Redevelopment of the allocation policy adopted through bylaw was complete using a set of goals. One was to document a standardized process to guide developers in securing committed capacity. So the allocation policy details the standard process in each step of development and how capacity is reserved. Number 2 is to implement a framework to monitor and manage allocation to optimize infrastructure investments and timing. So the allocation policy details the framework and planning tools used by staff to ensure capacity that is committed is utilized. 3 is to define expectations for capacity commitments associated with each type of development. So the allocation policy defines the different types of developments and how capacity would be reserved for clarity. And 4, create a mechanism which ensures the allocation of service and capacity in a fair, logical, and sustainable manner. So the allocation policy serves as a tool to ensure the development community acknowledges capacity entitlement is to progress development. So when looking at capacity, there are 2 phases the new allocation policy considers. First, we start with phase 1, being conditionally committed capacity. This conditional commitment is reserved for units and sites that are in their earlier stages of development. Historically, developments can be in the conditional phase of development for capacity for 3+ years or longer, with some sites holding conditional capacity for many years. Conditionally committed capacity then transitions into phase 2, being committed capacity. So this capacity commitment is reserved for units that are nearing construction where the capacity will soon be realized. So the following applications would fall under conditionally committed capacity. Draft plan of subdivisions, draft approved plan of condominiums, draft approved ICI plan of subdivisions, any submitted or circulated site plan, and consent to sever within the 2-year conditional period. The following applications would fall under committed capacity. It would be a registered plan of subdivisions, registered plan of condominiums, at site plan approval, including those for ICI plan of subdivisions, consent to sever once all conditions are fulfilled, additional residential units once capacity from Oxford County is confirmed through our sewage and water systems capacity confirmation forms, as well as multi-residential units. So conditionally committed capacity aligns with general timelines within the Planning Act. This would hold conditional capacity commitments for 3 years. Should an extension to an application be granted, this capacity can then continue to be held. Extensions may be granted by the Oxford County's Director of Planning in consultation with Oxford County Public Works and the area municipality. And this would apply for the following developments: plan of subdivisions, plan of condominiums, industrial, commercial, institutional plan of subdivisions, as well as submitted and circulated site plans. If extensions are not granted, conditionally committed capacity will be withdrawn. This would also apply to consent to sever within the 2-year conditional period. Conditionally committed capacity will be withdrawn if conditions are not met. So once committed capacity is granted, it will be held indefinitely or until such time that either the site or building is constructed and producing flows into the system. So utilized flows, as mentioned in a previous slide, represents the existing system flows that are experienced at our treatment facilities, either for water or wastewater. So utilized flows no longer need to be held as they're actively contributing to the system. So the exception would be for industrial sites that do hold an overstrength agreement and there is an agreed future commitment to capacity. Or if a lot or a site that has not yet been developed and is looking to be redeveloped, requiring alternative capacity requirements. There are many implications for carrying capacity for developments that are not progressing into construction on a water and wastewater system. They can limit capacity for shovel-ready developments. There's an impact to capital planning timelines. So timing of capital projects line up with anticipated build-outs based on building permit trends. When developments don't progress into construction, these timelines can be misaligned. Suboptimal timing of capacity expansions. So larger capital expansions, if not timed with the anticipated need, would mean added costs to any given community. This would mean additional hydro, chemical, or operational costs. Uh, Through the development of the revised allocation policy, the maximum units that are permitted to be registered per phase of development was also reviewed to manage applications in more appropriately sized phases and to accommodate a wider range of mixed uses and densities. Service communities have seen an increase to the maximum units that are permitted to be registered per phase of development. So you can see in the table here for our service communities for Drumbo, Embro, Innerkip, Mount Elgin, Norwich, Plattsville, and Tavistock have seen an increase to 50 units per registered phase, where Thamesford went up to 125, Ingersoll, Tilsonburg up to 150, and Woodstock up to 350. However, there are some of our smaller systems that do remain to be determined by staff on a per development basis. In the allocation policy, the Director of Public Works also has the discretion to increase units on a case-by-case basis. This increase would be only for specific cases and not a regular occurrence. Some examples would be if a development would require water main looping. Also, if there are lots in a registered phase where they would require a site plan approval in the future to be granted that committed capacity. So now we're going to dig into some common questions we anticipate to receive. So how does the allocation policy apply to my application? So the revised allocation policy applies to any new development approval under the Planning Act from the time this policy was adopted through bylaw, but also any existing developments or properties where allocation of capacity was previously committed. This would include older approved developments, developments where extensions are up for renewal, or existing lots that are looking to redevelop. So for instance, if there's an application with 25 units in a phase and the system now allows for 50 units per phase, the applicant would be able to apply for the additional 25 units under the new allocation policy. So how are capacity commitments held for industrial, commercial, and institutional ICI developments? The allocation policy clearly identifies the requirements an ICI development would require to achieve capacity commitments. The following is the process established in the policy. For ICI developments, the approval of any capacity design criteria shall be at the discretion of the county in consultation with the area municipality. Once the design criteria is established, conditional commitment of capacity shall be granted upon the execution of a development agreement and/or registration of the subdivision or condominium plan. Conditional capacity for the development shall be disclosed in the subdivision agreement. The subdivision agreement shall disclose the water supply and/or wastewater allocation and maximum flow limits to purchasers of blocks to the satisfaction of county public works. This will aid in understanding parameters of the development as well as understand any unutilized remaining capacity. And then confirmed capacity will occur at site plan approval. So what tools are used to manage servicing capacity allocation? So one tool used to manage servicing capacity would be holding zone provisions. This tool can be used to phase development in communities with limited capacity, significant approved development, significant capacity reservations, and servicing allocations with large multi-year buildouts. The key here is that it acts as a temporary measure and can be lifted once additional capacity is realized. This would allow time for development buildouts to also catch up with their capacity allotment. So Oxford County may request any area municipality to apply a holding zone provision within a plan of subdivision or condominium, site plans, which would look like phasing of a site plan, zone change application, and consents through a condition of approval. So as mentioned, these holding zone provisions would be lifted when sufficient reserve capacity and or wastewater water infrastructure is available and development agreements have been completed. So this brings us to the end of the presentation. If you are interested to reach out to Public Works about these changes, you can email water@oxfordcounty.ca. And if you are interested to increase units for your current application, please reach out to the Community Planning Office to get that process started. I hope the presentation has answered all of your questions, but as we're at the end of the presentation, we'll now open it up to any questions that we may have received. Tammy, was there any questions that came up?
There was just a question regarding if in the Q&A, there's a question regarding whether it'll be recorded and where it will be. Like, will it be shared?
Will this recording be shared? Oh, yes, we'll work with our communications team to publish this webinar. If not, we will just email a copy over to the attendees. And we'll just leave it here for a bit, see if anybody has any additional questions or comments.
Dan, there is a question in the Q&A.
Okay.
From Dan Ferguson.
Are exceptions to the policy to be processed through planning? Number of units per phase. Yeah. So we are going to run everything. We'll go through the community planning office here at the county for any of these exceptions to the policy. I don't know, Eric, if you wanted to elaborate on that.
Sure. So typically through either the draft approval process or through the detailed engineering design, that's when a phasing plan would be identified. And at that time, we would receive confirmation from Public Works that they're satisfied with the phasing plan. If there's a requested exception to the number of units, that would be discussed again, either through the detailed design or through the clearing of the conditions of draft approval. And we would grant that if there's a water main extension that had to happen, or a street connection, or some other reason why it made logical sense to have a larger phase than what the policy provided, we would consider that request at that time.
Perfect. Thank you. There we go. For residential site plan development, is committed capacity granted at registration of the phase of the subdivision or when the site plan approval is granted? So for residential subdivision, is capacity granted at the registration of the phase for subdivision or when site plan approval is granted? So for a residential site plan within a subdivision, I'm assuming that's how I'm reading that. The site plan would then have to go for site plan approval to get committed capacity. We hold conditionally committed capacity for site plans, for especially residential site plans. When we have a rough unit count, we'll hold conditionally committed capacity as part of the draft of the subdivision, but the capacity is only committed at site plan for a residential site plan. I hope that answers the question. I don't know, Eric, if you wanted to go a little bit deeper on that.
Yes, if there's a medium density block or some block in a residential plan of subdivision, it'd have the draft capacity when the plan was registered, but the final committed capacity would be granted, as Dan indicated, when the site plan was approved for that block.
And that's almost the example that I gave in the presentation, where this would be a prime example where the unit count in terms of the lots, this lot would have its final capacity committed only at site plan. So it can go in a lot. Let's say it's a subdivision area that allows for 50 units, and there's one medium density. We can sneak that one in because that capacity is not granted until final site plan approval.
Oh, Dan, I appreciate that. Much more efficient. My fingers don't move quite as fast as I'd like them to. I got a question on the sort of working on a development that has been draft plan approved. We built out 2 phases. Phasing was identified through the draft plan approval process. I'm just wondering if there's a willingness to revisit some of the just the phasing of that development. We got a couple phases that are actually both under the 50 unit count, and I think our total units would be more like 75, so not a big stretch over the allocation limits. Just wondering generally how the county is handling similar type situations where you've got a development that's midstream essentially.
So is this in one of our areas where we've increased it beyond the 50, or what would be the servicing community?
It had been 25, it's now 50 in this community.
It's now 50. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we can increase it up to the 50, and then anything over and beyond that, we would have to have internal discussions to see if it's warranted to allow it. As I mentioned, water main looping could be one of those areas where to get the water main to loop, you have to build out 3 or 4 or 5 additional units. We could pass those through, but what we're trying not to do with the exemptions that the director of public works is allowed to do is do them all over the place. So we're really trying to target the 50 so that it's more manageable on a capacity front. But if your specific situation would require additional units, you could always start that conversation with our planning office, and then they would trickle that down over into public works.
Perfect.
I don't know, Eric, if you wanted. Yeah,
Dan. Yeah, Eric, if there's anything else you can add, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
No, just as indicated earlier, there's some instances where the local municipality has asked for a road connection to be made. We're not going to make you build the road without being able to, generally have lots to be able to sell along that road. So I think the intent of the flexibility is just to recognize those situations where, for good reason, an appropriate phase includes more than the policy would allow. So that's why we have the exception in place.
If you do have any other questions, you could email them over at water@oxfordcounty.ca, and then we'll make sure you get the appropriate answer, especially if they're development-specific ones. We can also send those over to our community planning team. But I want to thank everybody for joining the webinar today, and look forward to seeing a copy of this on our website, and I will email over a copy of the slides to everyone. Thank you so much, and have a great day.